my boy Christopher De Santiago from a variety of things, but I would say he's primarily. Would you say that Sports Illustrated, the MMA Knockouts, is kind of the banner that you fly the most?
Yes, for sure. Sports Illustrated and Full Violence. Yeah, those are my two main ones right now.
Yeah, at Full Violence, you're like the social media guy for that.
Yeah, so I started with them as a social media manager, but now I'm a project manager. So now I'm like helping run the day to day on the content over there.
Man, it's crazy. Happened so fast.
Yeah,
Congratulations on all that, man. I mean, you're really grinding, man. I can definitely see it. Um,
thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me on the show, man.
of course, anytime. So I wanted to jump into a few topics. One, for anybody that doesn't know, you did a really good interview with Raquel Pennington following her
Thank you.
fight with Juliana Pena, and it made me curious as to how you see the division when it comes to those top three: Pennington, Pena, and Harrison. I mean, we saw that fight, and a lot of us, I think most of us, probably scored it for Raquel, but Pena is the one that walked out of there. But how do you see that whole thing shaking out? Considering that was a contentious decision, Dana thought that Pennington won, but obviously Harrison's probably going to get the next shot. But like, how do you see this whole thing shaking out?
Yeah, so from a business standpoint, I would say that Harrison versus Pena is likely probably the next title fight in the division. But from a merit standpoint, it's like, and from a competition standpoint as well, like you said, I didn't agree with the decision. I thought I gave rounds one, four, and five to Pennington. I thought she did enough just off the damage alone to retain the title. Don't agree with the decision. That being said, I feel like Pennington might be owed a rematch, given the work that she's done for the division. She had won her previous six fights. She was a champion going in. She knocked her down, had the more definitive moments in the fight, in my opinion. And, what to do with Kayla Harrison? She's cut weight to 136 pounds twice in 6 months. I say put Harrison on the sidelines, let her recover. Maybe give Pennington an instant rematch of Pena. Winner fights Harrison. Winner of that fights Nunez. There's a lot of different ways that you could kind of tackle this situation, but I think given the result that we saw in the decision, I feel like the next fight should be Pennington versus
Yeah, run it back. I feel like with Rocky, what's interesting about her is it seems like when she's in the fight, she grows within the fight. Like she gets more confident, and you could see it in this fight. And she won rounds 4 and 5. But I also saw, and I saw the same thing against Bueno Silva, that she had opportunities to end the fight, and her killer instinct doesn't switch on when I feel like the opportunity is there. Is that something that you saw, or do you see it kind of differently?
So I think with the Bueno Silva fight, I believe that Pennington was pretty sick. She said that she was dealing with the flu during that week. So I think a lot of that kind of went into her performance, and I feel like she, kind of had like a flu game. She went
Hmm.
in there, she did her best at the percentage that she was at, and she got the decision. Not the most exciting or most impressive performance out of her,
Yeah.
but I think when it comes to her, when it comes to having to win the fight, I feel like she did that under the worst circumstances. So I think in the Pena fight, I think she kind of showed that, hey, she wasn't the same fighter that she was back in January. She's kind of evolved. She kind of rises to the occasion, whenever the challenges present themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, especially if she was sick, then I can understand it. But moving to Pena, obviously, and you kind of alluded to it, the fact that it's kind of good for business to have somebody that's so vocal, that's so polarizing, be the one that walks away with the belt, whether she earned it or not. And I agree that it's probably best for Harrison's health that she kind of chills, because I mean that weight cut is a tough one. You could tell, but in her performance against Ketlin Vieira, did your stock on her go up or go down, or was it about the same after that fight?
So, like, I thought, honestly, heading into that fight, I thought Harrison was going to have her own, like way with her like completely. I thought it was going to be maybe 30-27, 30-26, something like that. I thought it was going to be kind of as dominant as the Holly Holm fight, but that wasn't the case. And it's kind of hard to say how good is Kayla Harrison because she also alluded to health issues before the fight. She was hospitalized. We don't know how, like, what percentage that she was on fight night compared to how Vieira was. So I do think that Harrison, that performance probably isn't the best example, but at the same time, I still think she's better than most of these girls, especially on her best night. I do think she, like, given what I said about Pennington, I do believe Harrison might be the best bantamweight in the world right now, not named Amanda Nunes. So I think her last performance doesn't do her any favors, but I think her next one will probably, do her favors in the next one.
Mm. Yeah, and I agree. I do think that she's the best bantamweight in the world that's actively fighting. I'll say this: I'm one of the few people that believes that Amanda Nunes should just stay retired. Like, I understand that it would be an exciting fight, everything like that, but like I'm kind of looking at it from a personal standpoint as far as like her as a person. Feel like there's not as much to prove coming back as one might think. Now there's money, there is money, and if that's the goal, then yeah, I guess you come back, and the outcome be damned. But if if it's not more than like, I feel like if it's money motivated, then we're gonna get something similar to not that she'll get knocked out like this, but we'll get a lackluster performance like we got from Volkanovski when he came back on short notice and it was money motivated. Like anytime that money is the motivation, I feel like you're not going to get the best out of that person. And when you're
Mm-hmm.
fighting a Kayla Harrison that's ready to go, and I'm assuming it's Kayla Harrison at that point, like you better be motivated because she's going to come motivated. That's a really tough fight.
And I feel like Amanda Nunes, she's already lapped the division so many times already.
Mm-hmm.
There's not many fights I'm excited for her besides Kayla Harrison. I'm not excited for the Pena rematch. We already saw what happened in the rematch at 50
Yeah.
43. That's enough to for me to close the book on that. Pennington rematch, I'm not sold on that. I think the Harrison fight's the only one that makes sense. There's not really any other opponents that make sense for Nunez. So I feel like, yeah, like you said, she doesn't have anything else to prove. Maybe some more money in the bank, but
Yeah, that's
I
about
don't think
it.
it's worth it.
Not at all. Not at all. But pivoting, one of the things that's kind of been a hot discussion this week is the rankings. Obviously, Dana White went on his rant about the rankings. He released that one social media post when he was talking about what was wrong with them, and then had the conversation with Kevin Iole at the Dana White's Contender Series press conference talking about the rankings. What are your thoughts on the rankings? Like, do you think that they're as broken as Dana makes it out to seem, or do you think that it should even be, something that they're looking at to fix?
Yeah, so with the rankings, I just feel like they're really outdated in terms of like the people that we have running them have been on the board for the last what, like maybe 8 years or something like that, something like that. And a lot of those outlets, I mean, they don't even cover MMA like exclusively or even often. That's what I've heard at least. I think we just need a new system. My solution would just to be get new media members, get the MMA junkies, MMA fightings of the world to kind of do that. People who know that what they're talking about, not to crap on the current rankings panel, but I would like to see a better panel because the rankings now just don't really make sense to me. I mean, Holloway should have been at least top three lightweight after he beat Gagey, but that wasn't the case. So I think we just need more new media members to switch out the current panel. Keep switching it out until Dana or until it starts to make sense for the rankings.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that example to me is far more egregious than the Khalil Roundtree situation. Max beating Justin Gaethje, who was what, number 3 at the time, and coming in at number 9 at the time. Like, that doesn't even make sense. I mean, and he beat him convincingly and then knocked him out. He already had to fight one and then knocked him out just for fun. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
that, to me, that immediately puts you top 5. But I I agree. Like I think one of the names that was listed there was like the Wrestling Observer, and I don't even think that it's talking about actual freestyle wrestling. I think it's actually talking about WWE,
Hmm.
AEW, that type of wrestling. I'm like that. You shouldn't have a hand in the rankings if that's what you're watching. Nothing against them, but that's not this. So yeah, I agree. Like switching those out, finding more reputable sources is a major part of it. But I have a whole plan. I have a video that I'm working on for that, on what I think that they should do. But I think that the ranking system is broken, and I hope that he doesn't go to AI to try to do it because I don't think that's the answer either. I think that somebody did it out in the audience there, one of the reporters, and they still had Alex when they did it with AI. They still had Volkanovski as number one. So I'm like, that's not right.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
like I just saw like I mean they're getting slightly better in the rankings. Like Charles Johnson, it took him 4 wins in a row to finally get a ranking of number 15. Like that should have been given to him at least maybe like 2 fights ago, in my opinion. But
Hmm.
four, I mean, come on, just give the man a ranking. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's bizarre, dude. It really is. But I don't know. I mean, they said that they had somebody coming in to meet with them to figure it out. We'll see what they come out with. I'm sure people are still going to have issues with it, but as long as we get a little bit closer to something that's more of a consensus, I would be okay with it. I don't expect that everybody's going to agree. It's just not, it's impossible for everybody to agree on, okay, this is the rankings. There's no denying all of these rankings. It's always going to be, somebody thinking something different.
Yeah, most definitely, man. I hope Dana White and the UFC, I hope they stay away from doing their own rankings because, like,
Mm,
for example, we might get John Jones number one pound for pound if that's the case. But I think they'll probably use a third party to handle their rankings.
hope so. I really hope so. So we got, in a few days, we got one of the biggest fights of the year, headlining UFC 308. Um, I know you're super excited for the Max Holloway Ilya Taporia fight, but kind of what are your thoughts? Kind of spell that out for me. Like, why are you so excited about that fight?
So I think this is the biggest featherweight title fight we've seen since McGregor versus Aldo. Obviously, like the next one's always the biggest one, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the momentum both men have going for them, I mean, Holloway off of that gorgeous Gagey knockout in April, Taporia and the knockout over Volkanovski, the first man ever to beat him at 145 pounds. It's like the immovable object versus the unstoppable force
Mm-hmm.
right here with this fight, and the momentum that they have going for them. I mean, it's through the roof, and you couldn't sell the fight better. I wish the fight was tomorrow because I can't wait for it. I think this is a very massive fight in terms of it kind of determines if Topuria is the next guy, at
Mm-hmm.
145. If he's gonna, this is like a make or break fight for him in terms of is he gonna be a dominant champion? Is he gonna be, you know, uh, edging close to that greatest of all time conversation later down the line, or will Holloway stop him and become a two-time champ? I think that's kind of the storylines going into this fight, and they can be more anticipated for this one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's just what you said. It's the momentum that's going into this fight for both of them. You know, it's it feels like nowadays it's getting less often that the challenger is somebody that everybody agrees with is the rightful challenger. Like there always seems to be a challenger that's going in and people are like, I don't know if he should be the one fighting for the belt. Like in this case, we know Max is the rightful challenger for this belt. And Ilya coming off of that, sparking Alexander Volkanovski the way that he did creates that seed of doubt. Like, I don't know if Max is going to be, able to get through this. You got this young, hungry dude that is taking heads and doing it stylistically. Like the dude is like, he's got another level of style that, we don't see that we haven't seen really since McGregor, to be honest, like the way that he carries himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, I feel like that part plays into it. And then, like you said, the future of the division and and the way that this affects the greatest of all time conversation when it comes to the featherweight division is so monumental. So it's like, yeah, there's so many things that you can write from this, so many stories that can come out of this. If Ilya wins, then he's, already set on his path to do something that we haven't seen in the featherweight division since Max or Alex, beating somebody who's an all-time great and doing it back to back like he would be doing it is pretty impressive, and he'll be right on his way to becoming one of the greats himself. But which leads me into another question. If Max loses, which for me, this is what makes me nervous about this fight. Like you said, you wish it was happening tomorrow. I almost wish we had another week. I'm nervous. But if Max loses, what then? What do you think that he should do if he does lose?
So I believe this is his third attempt to become a two-time champ. He's already dropped two in a row. He's dropped the last two fights after losing the title to Volkanovski. He's cleared out just about everybody else in the division, not named Volkanovski. I feel like with the BMF title status still being with him, win or lose, I feel like lightweight is the next move for him. I really like that Dan Hooker fight for him. I think it's a BMF title fight, win, lose, or draw against Topuria. There's so many fights for him at lightweight. I think the Dan Hooker fight makes sense. I think the Conor McGregor fight could even make sense. At some point. I don't know if Conor will fight again. I believe so, but I think Max has definitely got some options at lightweight. Chandler wins, he could possibly beat her himself, maybe Oliveira. There's no shortage of fun fights for Max Holloway, so I think maybe something fun at lightweight, maybe Dan Hooker, Connor, Charles, Michael, Chandler, something like that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. He still has options. That's what beating Justin Gaethje gave him, was all kinds of options, win or lose. And he's still young in the game, even though he's been in the UFC for over a decade. He's still only 32 years old. That's kind of crazy to say. He's had a whole career, and now he's about to have another one, as far as like the back end of it. So, I mean, if he does win, though, if he does win, do you think that he fights Volkanovski straight away? Or does he go to the UFC and say, hey, look, I've done a lot for y'all. I've been in this division. I've held this belt. Let me go and chase immortality, see if I can beat Islam Makhachev. Obviously, Islam is supposed to fight Arman, so it would be a little bit down the line, and it could be Arman that wins. Who knows? But would you, if you were Max, consider, let me go and see if I can do this and become the first person with 3 belts? Even though it's a BMF, he would still have 3 belts.
Mm-hmm. So I hold Holloway in a high regard in terms of I think he's maybe top 5 biggest superstar in the UFC right now. Especially if he were to beat Topuria, I mean he's probably top 3, maybe behind Conor, Pereira, people like that. I feel like there's a lot of interest in the Volkanovski and Lopez fight. I think the UFC will probably end up doing that fight for the interim title in February. I know it might not make all the sense in the world, but I feel like if they do interim title, then Holloway could, do as he pleases in the lightweight division, something like that. That's what they did for Volkanovski whenever he went up. They made the interim title for Yair, fought him in his return. I think they do something similar like that, but I guess it depends on what Max wants. If I was Max, personally, I would defend the BMF title against somebody at lightweight.
If I were Max, I'm going up to Islam, whoever wins out of Islam and Arman, to fight for that 3rd belt. That's what I would want. I would want that, because I feel like if otherwise he would have to fight another top 5 person to get to the belt. And I feel like I would just be subtracting a fight for him. I would rather just go and fight for the belt rather than let me fight Dan Hooker and then fight for the belt. Like, Dan Hooker is not an easy fight to go through. So I would rather let me just shoot right to the belt if I can, and use the opportunity to see if I can do some magical, because he's already done something magical earlier in the year. Why not see if he could do it again? That's what I would do. I mean, but I've never heard from him that those are his goals. He kind of keeps some of that stuff close to his vest. I know that he's always wanted to get that Volkanovski fight back, but that he mentioned that often when Volk was the champ. But now that Volk isn't the champ, I don't hear him saying that he wants that fight back necessarily. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting, but he's got a tough test right now to get through this killer in Taporia. I don't know. I don't know. But who are you favoring going into this?
So I've been kind of going back and forth on this pick for like weeks. At first, I was leaning towards Holloway. A few days ago, I was leaning towards Euphoria. I think right now, as of currently, I'm leaning towards Holloway. Um, I feel like his chin really, I feel like his chin's a really big factor in this fight because Euphoриa's power is just insane. Euphoria really good at being the hammer,
Yeah.
but we haven't really seen him beat a nail in his fights. And we
Uh,
haven't seen him really go through deep water. And Holloway is somebody that I could see dragging him to deep water in the championship rounds, especially for rounds 4 and 5. We saw him there against Josh Emmett, but Josh Emmett didn't pose too much problems against him in those later rounds. So I think Holloway, he does have a variety of strikes. He's gonna have to watch out for the leg kicks, the power shots, the slick boxing. I do think that Topuria has a speed advantage and maybe the better hands in the pocket, but I think Holloway's chin, his cardio, his kicks, his variety of strikes. I'm leaning towards Holloway just by like a hair in this fight. I think Holloway probably gets it done, maybe championship rounds or maybe a decision.
I've talked to two people that fought Ilya Taporia. I just did an interview a couple of days ago with Josh Emmett, and I did an interview last month with Damon Jackson. And I asked them both about the fight and where how they were favoring it. Josh said kind of what you just said as far as like the speed, the youth, all the tools that Taporia has in his bag. He said he's kind of sees it going Taporia's way, but he wouldn't be surprised if Holloway figured it out. But when I asked Damon Jackson, he immediately said Holloway. He said Holloway's too smart. He said he's going to figure it out. He's like, it's not that Taporia doesn't have, all of those tools. He definitely has all those tools. He can do so many things well. He's like, but Holloway's seen so much. He's so knowledgeable beyond his years because of the fact that he's been in the UFC for so long and fighting top level competition for so long. So he actually, I mean, immediately said Holloway. So I don't know, man. I'm personally, it's hard for me not to go with my gut and go with, how I feel, my heart. And, I lean Holloway because of that. But I've seen so much material now, in fight week. It's almost like they're trying to convince me to go Taporia. But I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go Holloway. I'm going to stick with him. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, there's another fight, another with title implications on the card. And it is the Robert Whittaker against Hamza Chimaev fight. And hopefully, we're just a few days out. Hopefully this fight sticks together. But there's still things that can happen. So we don't know. But specifically about Robert Whittaker, I feel like there's a lot of coverage and a lot of conversation about Hamza Chimaev, obviously because of all the things that surround him and the circumstances that have happened. But for Robert Whittaker, it's an interesting situation where he's almost in the same situation that Max was in, where he's beating all these contenders, but when it comes to the top, one or two guys, he's lost to Strickland. I mean, not Strickland, but he's lost to DDP and lost to Izzy. But with the win, this should put him right there in the conversation for the title. But all time overall, he's had an amazing career. But where do you think that a win over Hamza Chimaev puts him as far as his career compared to other middleweights?
Yeah, so I think I think we talked a little bit off camera about this, about kind of putting them as like a Mount Rushmore kind of thing. I do think Whittaker is maybe like a top three middleweight. I only put Silva and Adesanya, I think, above Whittaker in terms of the resume and the consistency this guy has had for the last decade or so is just insane. He's taken out wave after wave of middleweight contenders. He's only lost to Adesanya and Dricus, who's the current champ, just about. And I feel like that consistency and that longevity has to count for something. And while he hasn't held the belts for a while, I feel like that's got to mean something. So I definitely put him at top three right now at middleweight.
Yeah, it's hard to even think of other fighters that you could possibly put above him. Maybe Rich Franklin. I
Hmm.
wouldn't put Michael Bisping above him. I put him below him only because I feel like beating Dan Henderson as a title defense doesn't really help your. It doesn't hurt you. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a win, but it doesn't really help you that much. And the way that GSP kind of came out of nowhere and just kind of destroyed your life, that kind of puts you down a little bit lower to me. But I, I think I might agree, man. He might be the third best middleweight of all time, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think Bisping, like with, credit to him for winning the belt and everything, but defending the title against Stan Henderson, who was ranked maybe like what 14 at the time,
Yeah, he's pretty
46
low.
years old. Like he shouldn't have been in that position in the first place, Henderson, to get the title rematch. And I feel like Bisping should have fought Romero. What the Whittaker fight was supposed to happen, but injuries took place. Whittaker fought everybody that they put in front of him. Yeah, I would definitely have Whittaker kind of above every of the other former champions of that division, most of them.
Yeah, yeah, true, true. So yeah, man, I'm excited about the card. But before we get out of here, what do you have going on that you can let people know about?
Yeah, so I got confirmed for the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight next month.
Oh,
So yeah, it's gonna be good. Gonna go for SI, which is funny. I'm glad that you're reminding me. I need to book off the hotel and stuff for that. But yeah, nothing much for travel. I'm kind of looking at next year for UFC events and stuff. Right now, the current schedule, I'm like, okay, maybe I kind of want to go to some other different places than Vegas again. So like, yeah, I'm gonna scope out the first quarter of events for next year. Hopefully, they come to our home state of Texas
that'd be
in the
nice.
first quarter. But yeah, let's hope for it.
Yeah, if they come to anywhere in the vicinity, I can see if I can try to argue with the UFC to get some credentials.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That'd be awesome, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. But yeah, appreciate it, man. Appreciate you jumping on.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me.